you're incredibly passionate about simplifying what the role of a leader is. Just walk us through some of the big building blocks of your thinking around that.
Well, I think the first thing is to establish that what leadership is. And for me, leadership is the navigation of a group of people from a defined state in the present to a different and clearly defined state that exists in the future. So leadership is by definition for me about change. And I think I always say to people, if you can remember just 2 words when it comes to the subject of leadership, because as I've said, there's a whole lot of blah about it. But if you just remember 2 words, and those words are clarity and action, then you're not going to go too far wrong. And even more than that, because I don't know if I said I did a degree in engineering basically, and therefore I'm this kind of weird person that quite enjoys maths. Most people's eyes glaze over when it comes to equations. I quite like equations, so I thought I'll write an equation, right? So I said, well, okay, let's talk about leadership impact. Leaders want to create impact. So let's say we want to create impact. How do we define what that is? Well, for me, leadership impact is clarity multiplied by action. And for me, clarity is all the things that they talk about. I somewhat dismissively originally called it business school stuff, and I don't intend to be dismissive, but that's all the things we talk about normally when we talk about leadership. So that's missions and visions and values and purpose and strategy. And all those things are important. But then you multiply clarity by action. And the point of my slightly cod equation is, no matter how fabulous your strategy is, if your action is 0, your impact is 0. So leadership doesn't begin until you're creating action, till you're doing. Leadership is a doing word, not a thinking word in my mind. And I think the other point really about my cod equation is that actually it biases towards action. So what it says is, even if your strategy, let's say, is imperfect, if you bias towards action, you're still going to create impact. And in fact, the reality is, of course, is your strategy is going to be imperfect. I mean, it is. I mean, one of my favorite quotes, Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. I mean, that's my equation read in tooth and claw. Okay. So leadership is about clarity and action. And I think I'd make one other observation about that. I think the way to break that down is to think to yourself, imagine a start point. Okay, so if leadership is about action, is about a journey, the first thing you have to do is define a start point. And so this is a simple definition of the problem you're trying to solve as a leader. Now, the leadership industrial complex will sell you a ton of consultancy to help you answer that question. Buy that if you like, but it's not a difficult question to answer. It's the kind of, if you want to understand the biggest challenge a retailer has, go and talk to the person that works on the checkout. It's that, okay? So define that. The key there is to be honest, is to be able to be honest about the problem. Not always easy, be honest. The second point is, where are you trying to get to? And this is where that industry makes it. This is where the leadership industrial complex makes its money. This is visions, values, purposes, BHAGs, all that kind of stuff. And we are told as leaders that coming up with a really clever answer to where you want to get to is the defining task for a leader. And I say bullshit. For me, that also isn't a very difficult question, and don't treat it as a difficult question. And the problem a lot of leaders have is they've been told that coming up with a really clever answer to that question is almost a sign of leadership virility. And I've been part of leadership teams, I'm sure many others have too, where they've become so obsessed with the answer to that question, they've never actually got beyond trying to answer it. Whereas in actual fact, we've all been on those offsites, right? Where you all get into that group think, you come up with an answer at the end of the day, you get back into work on the Monday and you can't even agree what it is you all came up with. And then you try and explain it to somebody who wasn't in the room and they go, what? And we've all been there. And I think part of that is because we've been told to search for uniqueness, whereas in reality, the vast majority of businesses are just trying to do a common thing better than the competition. And so, if you've got something unique, just write it in there, move on. But most businesses don't. So that's just a direction. Don't aim for a pinhead, aim for a direction. You can always review that as you go. But neither of those two things are leadership. Those aren't leadership. Leadership is how you get between those 2 points. So I suppose those two are your clarity, but the leadership is the action, and action is getting between the two.